Can you see the eyes?
Yes.
You see how the sacks are gone in this bottle right here?
Yeah.
Okay, now they've got to go hunt for their own food.
The Sandy River in northwestern Oregon is a place for remarkable discoveries, where the experience of wildness seems to transcend time. For generations, the Sandy has attracted pleasure seekers and adventurers.
People can drive just 40 minutes from a metropolitan area that has close to 3 million people. And there are places here where you can feel like you're transported back to Lewis and Clark's time. There's ancient forests, so trees that are close to 800 years old. There's even large mammals such as elk and black bear that use this as part of their territory. When Lewis and Clark came here, Mount Hood had recently erupted in the late 1790s, and so it was still flushing the effluent from that eruption, and that's why they called it the Quicksand River. They found a wilderness that's difficult for us to imagine.
Much has been changed here over the past 200 years. The basin's most celebrated wild creatures, fall and spring chinook and winter steelhead, are quiet witnesses to this history. Today, they are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. What will be the Sandy River's legacy for the next century of explorers? East of Portland, Oregon, the view is dominated by Mount Hood. Along its western face, the Sandy River gathers itself from rain, snow, and glacial meltwater. The Zigzag, the Salmon, and the Bull Run join with a chorus of dozens of other tributaries for the Sandy's 56-mile journey, from steeply forested wilderness, through isolated canyons, into the lower and most developed stretch, and finally to its confluence with the Columbia River near the city of Troutdale. Jack Glass lives on the lower Sandy. His commute may be one of the shortest in Oregon.
Well, another day at work. I work as a full-time fishing guide on the Sandy and Columbia Rivers. I've been doing this for 22 years. I'm in love with this river, no question. The Sandy's been a passion of mine since I was 8 years old. I caught my very first steelhead on the Sandy, and I've always wanted to protect it and enhance it and enjoy the resource as well. The only way you can enjoy it is you have to protect it. With our wild fish in this river, when you catch one, we have to release it unharmed. When we catch a hatchery fish, we're able to keep that fish and take it home for dinner.
The basin has nourished people since long before recorded history.
No, we tell stories all the time, whether they're true or not.
Native Americans knew the Sandy well. Their forest trails were countless. One of them became the Barlow Road, opening the lower basin to settlers crossing the Cascades in the late 1840s. Development followed quickly, as newcomers were drawn to the area's natural riches.
There is so much logging done on the Sandy River that I'm sure the salmon are kept out of the stream. Worker, Oregon Department of Fisheries, 1909.
Today, growing communities in the 500-square-mile Sandy Basin include portions of Multnomah and Clackamas counties, parts of Sandy, Gresham, and Troutdale, and a series of unincorporated towns linked to corridors like Highway 26. Larry Callister grew up on the Sandy and watched it change, but his roots here run deeper still.
Sandy River, being the major river nearest to the Portland area, was something that was a great resource for the early pioneers and the people developing Portland area. And by tapping into the river, they were able to give a legacy to the following generations.
In 1892, President Benjamin Harrison approved the establishment of the Bull Run Reserve to protect a major tributary of the Sandy. Today, the Portland Water Bureau manages this water supply for nearly 800,000 people.
Yeah, that's a picture of my grandfather, Ernie Callister, back in the early 1920s, working on the Bull Run Pipeline project.
On January 2, 1895, officials turned the spigot, creating a liquid lifeline from the mountain streams of the Sandy Basin to the citizens of Portland. More than 100 years later, monitoring flows in the Bull Run has taken on new importance.
In the wintertime, when it rains so much, we have a lot of flow to go around, and it's easy to meet what people need and what fish need. The summer is a whole different situation. It stops raining, stream flows naturally go down, and that is the time of year where we have our highest demand from people.
Fish also need adequate amounts of cold water in the summer, and so the Portland Water Bureau is now releasing flows to support them.
What we do here makes a difference. It will make it better for fish here, and also as water flows downstream, it's going to make habitat conditions better for fish for our neighbors elsewhere in the Sandy Basin.
Residents can honor their connection to the Sandy and help restore its streams and rivers by conserving water. Many others are doing their part too. Portland General Electric produces enough hydropower at the Marmot and Little Sandy dams for over 6,000 people. But soon, electricity will come from other sources as dams are removed to make way for fish.
This project's coming out because it's the right solution here for PGE's customers and for the environment. PGE's been privileged to use the public's lands and waters for almost 100 years now, and it's time for us to turn around and give something back.
When the dams are gone, salmon and steelhead will have access to historic habitats.
That's being accomplished in a partnership with Western Rivers Conservancy and with the BLM, so that all of PGE's project lands will go into public ownership and be preserved basically in perpetuity for folks to use.
Businesses, agencies, and nonprofit groups are working cooperatively together with citizens to create a heritage of restoration in the Sandy Basin.
I look at it as a legacy of what I'm leaving the next generation. I would like to think that we will take what we have now and it'll be better when we retire. We're getting lots of rain today, probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and we can see that by the rain bringing the rivers up right now.
Dwayne Bishop works in and around Mount Hood's Zigzag Ranger District, turning the science of fish recovery into reality on the ground.
Research has been pretty comprehensive. One thing we focus on in this basin that we have effect on actually is the habitat. Generally, salmon or steelhead are looking for really diverse habitat, some fast water, some white water, some slow water, but also areas where they can rear and get out of the winter or high flow events.
About 75% of the Sandy Basin is federal forest, managed by the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management.
We, the Forest Service, are part of a larger partnership, and we've partnered with several state and federal agencies, but also, more importantly, the private landowner that lives along those streams and really can become stewards of those stretches of river.
Okay, guys, why don't you grab a twig?
Shauna Stong and her family are participants working to restore a side channel of the Salmon River in Welches, Oregon.
As a girl, it was cool coming up here with my dad, to have him take me to the river. Tons of fish out there. I mean, you would always come back with something.
Decades ago, when the community turned a portion of the channel into a pond, the ecosystem responded.
Because there was so much sediment in it, there was no water flowing through it. And over time, that pond proved to be detrimental to the migration of the salmon.
Once neighbors decided to fix the problem, they teamed up with the Forest Service and the Sandy River Basin Watershed Council. Today their project is nearly completed.
It's just so cool to see that the fish are back, that my kids will have the experience of what I had with my dad fishing on the Salmon River.
They're about that big, and they're about that small.
Quietly in every corner of the basin, people's actions accumulate, gathering like tributaries to something larger, a legacy of restoration. Basin partners agree that every effort counts, especially when it comes to controlling invasive plants.
In our case, we've been closely following about 400 patches of knotweed in the Sandy River Gorge. And over the last 3 years of working with them, we've seen the number of patches go down by about 80%.
So far, more than 300 private landowners have pitched in to help get rid of knotweed along waterways.
Invasive species eliminate native vegetation. And when you're talking about the vegetation along the shoreline of a river system like this, the vegetation provides the essential bedrock for salmon habitat.
Every little piece helps, and it's incremental, but it adds up.
If you think about this region, we've had salmon coming from the Pacific Ocean for millions of years, and they're bringing elements like boron or trace elements like that. They're bringing calcium in their bones, and they die here in these watersheds, and they spread those nutrients through the land that way. So think about billions of salmon bodies over millions of years that have laid nutrients in the ground here from the ocean. In turn, that supports these amazing forests.
There are 2 backpacks of fish already over there.
Until the salmon return in sufficient numbers, volunteers with the Sandy River Basin Watershed Council distribute the bodies of hatchery fish to nourish the river.
Well, by throwing the salmon in there, the flesh from the dead fish will actually feed the egg and the baby salmon that grow in the creek. And it'll attract bugs, all kinds of bugs for the babies to eat.
The desire to make a place better, that's also what motivates teacher Larry Callister of Reynolds High School.
My family came out to this area in the 1850s in the wagon trains, and then I grew up right nearby here. And the thing that got me going toward thinking about the environment when I was a kid was that I always heard my grandfather and my uncles telling stories about how many fish there used to be and deer and elk and how things used to be, and it was just always a downhill story. It was never as good as it was in the old days. And I had to wonder to myself, well, why does it always have to get worse? You know, I'd like it to get better.
Ammonia nitrate.
And what did you
Just
guys
minutes from downtown Troutdale, along one of the last tributaries to the Sandy before it joins the Columbia River. Larry's students are sampling the water quality of Beaver Creek.
Most kids' experience with this creek and this watershed have been just to drive over in a car. Well, now when they drive over, I want these kids to have some connection to the watershed and the land that they live in.
I would love to come back here and see this place filled with fish in 20 years from now. That would be wonderful, because this is where they belong.